So now it is my great pleasure to welcome and introduce Louise Jaggard, Claire Pring and Jo Cone, who will be leading the rest of this webinar with you today. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lindsay. Hi, I'm Louise Jaggard and I'm co-author of our new book, Making a Move. I've been teaching for about the last 20 years across many different settings, and I'm now the Artistic Director of Jumpstart into Primary School Dance. So that's me. I'd also like to introduce you to Claire Pring, who is a co-author of the book. Claire is currently the lead practitioner for dance at Derbyshire County Council, and she's a member of the Royal Opera House's Create and Dance team. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to Jo Cone, and she is an early years and primary school specialist and artistic director of Doodle Dance. She has also established Fuel Collective to develop resources and support artists. So if you haven't already, please can you now turn your cameras off. We are going to chat to you for a little while, and then there's going to be a few opportunities for us to connect together again in a short while. Thank you. So it's just down at the bottom, it just says stop video. Fabulous. So during the next hour, we're going to tell you more about making a move. We're going to dance together using one of the plans from the book, and then we're going to finish by holding a collective conversation around the practicalities of getting back into teaching. The last few months have been a particularly difficult time for the arts, so today we aim to inject positivity into your day and inspire you to either return to or begin your journey teaching with children. We all know that dance brings people together, and today's webinar is about those very special connections. The connections between the three of us as authors, and we're very lucky. We've had connections with People Dancing, with One Dance UK, and with Charlotte Tomlinson in the creation and distribution of this resource. We've also got connections between us as facilitators and the children that will be dancing with this resource or with the resources that you guys use. And we're also going to make connections today between each other, and we'll be doing that through chat and through physical exploration. And moving forwards, there's also connections that we as practitioners need to make between ourselves and the schools or the settings that we're working in order to enable our communities to come together again. The idea of our book, Making a Move, came after looking at the guidance from the Association for PE, so that's the AFPE, and they support the physical education, school sport and physical activity workforce. And as you may well be aware, dance sits within the PE curriculum within primary schools. So the recent guidance around COVID-19 does make a bit of a depressing read on initial viewing. They discourage physical contact, they discourage equipment and props, and obviously social distancing needs to be in place with having 2 metre gaps between the children. These restrictions are vital to make sure that we keep ourselves safe, so us as practitioners and as for the children and for the schools and the communities that they live in. But the guidance on initial reading doesn't sound fun, inspiring or engaging. So these restrictions actually then became a challenge. And one of the main question was around how can dance teachers abide by government guidance whilst also using our integrity as practitioners to provide fun and meaningful artistic content. So those ideas then became the basis of the book. So Claire and Jo and myself have written and produced this within the last 10 weeks. We've also been incredibly lucky that Jo, through Doodle Dance, has been able to provide us with support by adjusting some of her existing Arts Council project. Initially, we intended the book to be aimed at artists who deliver within primary schools, but actually we soon realised that it would be relevant to numerous settings, including sort of youth companies, nurseries, and inclusive groups. When we were in initial discussions around the content of the book, obviously we wanted to create plans that made no use or very little use of props and equipment. We decided we wanted to completely avoid physical contact and could be delivered with children socially distanced and only moving around their own personal space. Obviously, they're the guidelines that we've do completely, but we didn't want the sessions to be dry and boring and not meaningful. So what we decided was going to be really important and integral to the book were three things. So first of all, it needed to be fun. And obviously there's a natural joy in movement, and we all know we're more likely to do something when we enjoy it. And this is particularly important at this time where, according to Sport England data, there's been a significant reduction in physical activity in children aged 16 and under. And this was something that was brought out in the One Dance UK webinar that they delivered a few days ago. So pre-COVID, 47% of children were recorded as doing 1 hour or more of physical activity per day. But this has now dropped to 19% post-COVID. And 7% of children, worryingly, were recorded as doing 0 physical activity. So fun is at the heart of what we're delivering here, because if children are having fun, they're motivated to engage. Secondly, we wanted the plans to be creative. We wanted to give children a voice and allow them to express their feelings and experiences. And we wondered, how do we empower and free young people when so many restrictions and limitations have been imposed on them? Finally, connection was a key factor for us. At a time where we can't interact physically, how can we still connect together? How can we have a collective experience? And how can we create a sense of unity when we can't be close together? So Claire is now going to talk a little more detail about the structure of the plans, but she's very much going to come back to this idea of connection and relate them to how we've used relationships between class participants within our lesson plans.
Okay, thank you, Louise. So I'm going to start off, as Louise has just mentioned, by looking at the resource, and there should be a PowerPoint to go with this to share with you, and I believe this is going to be made available for you afterwards, so don't feel you've got to scribble down loads of notes. You will get lots of backup afterwards. So we're going to look at the actual physical resource, how it's structured, and how you might use it yourself. So very simply, it's a collection of 30 lesson plans, and each stemming from a different starting point. We've split these into relaxed, moderate, or high energy sessions, and they're color-coded accordingly. But more than that, we've split them into 10, 20, or 30-minute sessions. We anticipate that primary PE is unlikely to last for more than 30 minutes, and this is largely because of the cleaning, the impact of longer lunch breaks, and just the plain old availability of the space. And the current advice is that there needs to be a 10-minute minimum gap between one group leaving a space and the next entering it. But each lesson plan could be explored in greater depth, and therefore could take much longer, and many of them could easily be developed into 2 or even 3 lessons. So each lesson plan is split into clear sections. There's a warm-up, a creative exploration, a devising phase, performing opportunity, and of course a cool down. The sections are clearly identified down the left-hand column of the plan. So if you're working alongside someone else, it should be really clear which section of the plan you are covering. Now, not every plan has every section. If you're only doing one of the 10-minute sections, one of the 10-minute plans, you're probably not going to cram it all in. So sometimes they don't have devising, or maybe they don't have performance. So we're going to have a quick look at one now as an example. So it's rather small there, but I hope you can see. So on the left, we've got it that it's marked as the warm-up section of the lesson. And this one, very appropriately, is titled Bubbles. So the central column, the writing there in bold, is the task for the children to explore. So on this particular bit, we have asked the children to find a space and make a small shape, and then increase in size, followed by decreasing again. And beneath that, there are some hints and tips for the teacher to help frame the work. So you might repeat it several times, finding different ways each time. You might use the whole or just part of the body. You might vary your language to include words such as expand, deflate, grow, shrink, open, close, and also a little tip about when to add the music. And one thing I really like to do is always describe what you see the children doing. Now, some of these will also add some challenge there, a little bit saying to add challenge. This might be for older students, it might be for very able or more experienced dancers, or it might be something you decide to use in a follow-up lesson. Now, we've made all the warm-ups an integral part of the lesson. With the lessons potentially being much shorter than ever, there's a greater pressure to make every second count. Now, you'll notice there's also a right-hand column there, and down this side, it identifies the skills or the knowledge that we'll be focusing on in that specific task. So this should help with a sense of progression and assessment. So as you can see, the format is followed throughout of the plan. They easily fit onto one side of A4, so if you do need to print them off, it should be easy to do so. All the work is generated through a task setting process, and this should help if working with mixed age groups, especially if there is a second spike and then schools start organising their bubbles differently. But it also encourages creative and original thinking, which dance-wise, maybe they haven't done for a while. Maybe much of their recent dance experience will be copying TikTok dances. I know that's true of my daughter. Obviously, it allows for differentiation of age, experience, enthusiasm. It also makes the work very accessible, and there's so many possible responses to each idea. It allows the teacher to easily adjust the tasks to meet the needs of that group in front of you. For example, with the first task here, we've got finding different ways of making rounded or curved shapes. So the teacher could guide them by naming different body parts. Can you make your hand curved? Can you curve your tongue? How can you make your knee rounded? This idea of can you? Or you can increase complexity with, can you curve an arm over your head? Can you curve a leg behind you? What's the smallest curve you can do? What's the fastest? And each task should flow on quite logically to the next. So you're probably thinking, oh, this probably really isn't so different from what I usually do. And I really hope that that's right. We don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We cover all the usual, the action, the space, the dynamic, all of that is in there. Obviously, we pay particular care and attention to travel, space, and of course, relationships. So the travel now focuses largely on up-down, in circles, or going around a specific point, or even single body parts traveling away from and towards the body. Space uses levels and that sense of the personal space around them. So we're not encouraging traveling around the room. As for the relationships, here we have selected those that are commonly used in primary schools and focused on those that do not require contact. Now, we're not supposing for a moment that you can get all children to maintain non-contact throughout a practical lesson, but the plans do not call for it, so we're attempting to minimise it. It's about risk reduction. So the relationships we focused upon are unison, so there's lots of opportunities for work on different formations still. Canon, again, lots of variations here in terms of spacings, timings. Mirroring, Well, that's naturally done with a bit of a gap, but how would that be if that gap were to widen? Question and answer. Again, we've got the spacing or arrangement of the dancers to be varied, and we can use contrast and complement. And again, they don't need any contact necessarily. So at no point are the children encouraged towards contact. Then, at the very bottom of their page, there's a hyperlink for suitable music. Simply click on the name of the artist or the music, and it will take you to the music on iTunes. Alternatively, simply search the song on your choice of platform or access the Making a Move playlist on Spotify. Now, the music link is only intended as a time saver. It is not compulsory by any means, so if you do not like it or you think your students won't like it, feel free to substitute anything else that you like. And there's also a suggestion on each plan might connect with other areas of the curriculum. And finally, from me, whenever you write a resource, you do so with an imaginary group in mind. We are absolutely aware that everyone is likely to deliver these in their own way, and we would strongly encourage you to do so, and then share your ideas. And the other consideration is that we may need to adapt them as the COVID advice changes over time and how it works in different settings. So please, if you have a brilliant idea, if you've come across an excellent piece of music for one, or if you've hit a problem, please contact us. We have used the hashtag Making a Move to facilitate this, or alternatively, feel free to contact any of us through our website, and they're all on the resource. I'm going to hand back now to Louise, ready for the practical.
Thank you. So Claire has outlined one of our plans there, which is our bubbles lesson plan. And we thought this might be quite an appropriate one, given that there's lots of talk about bubbles at the minute. And also continuing the theme of connections, we're going to invite you to now turn your cameras back on and put yourself back into gallery view so you can see everybody. Because this way we're better placed to interact and we can have a collective physical moment together. Brilliant, thank you. Now you might want to move. I'm going to stand up so a little bit more space, but it's entirely up to you. So you can clear a bit of space, you can stay seated, use the space as it feels right for you guys. So if you want to do any adjusting, then do that now. If you don't want to do any adjusting, that's fine, just stay as you are. And you don't have to put your cameras on. So if you'd rather turn everything off and just take part without everyone else looking, that's fine too. So just do what is comfortable for you. Okay. So as with all of our lesson plans, and as Claire's just mentioned there about can you, this is very much the structure that I'm going to be following now. And there's a series of activities for you guys to respond to in your own way. So you can use one small part of the body, the whole part, it's entirely up to you, but just be mindful of the space you have got, because obviously we want to keep our bodies safe. And if anything's uncomfortable or doesn't feel right, then obviously adapt it or stop if you feel you need to. So we've written this book considering that a dance artist or a teacher would be in front of a class of children, whether that's in school or whether it's in a community setting. Today, obviously, we're in each other's houses at the minute. So I've adapted the way that I would deliver this so that it suits how we are today, which is obviously in this webinar format. So just bear in mind that there's a couple of things that obviously wouldn't be appropriate if I was in a studio or school hall space. Okay, yeah, I'm also going to whiz through the content quite quickly, purely because I want to give you as much of an experience as possible. So the speed that I'm going to do this now wouldn't be the speed at which I would deliver if I was with children. Okay. So we're going to start off then with a part of the body. No right or wrong, you just decide which part we're going to do. I'm going to warm ourselves up a little bit first. So I'm going to mostly use the top of my body because obviously you can see me and you can't see the bottom half of my body, but feel free to use whatever part you like. So just choose a part of your body and make it as small as possible. Brilliant. And then we're going to open and expand it, widen it, stretch it, and then make that one part as large and as expansive as possible. Brilliant. Then we're just going to reverse that. So then we're going to make it smaller. It might fold or close. You might clench or tighten and make it as small as you can. Fabulous. All right, we'll do that with a different part of our body now. So exactly the same activity, but just somewhere else in your body. So you're going to make it as small as you can. And then we're gradually going to loosen and stretch it and fold it and open it up wherever feels comfortable to do so. It's nice and big, and then we're going to rewind that again. So it's all going to tighten and fold or close and become as small as possible. Brilliant. So our bodies are a little bit warmer now. We are going to now consider in a little bit more detail the shape that we're making while we're moving. So the theme is bubbles. So we are going to make shapes now that are rounded or curved in some way. So we're going to start off small again, but this time when we expand, we're going to open out into a curved shape. So if you just do that a few times in your own time, so starting small and then opening out, unfolding, but now ending in some kind of curved shape. Brilliant. And then bring it back down to where you started, and then organically move it into a different part of your body, curving. And then when you're ready, closing and becoming smaller again. We'll do that one last time, and this time I invite you to involve your breath in the movement. And I think breath is very much a key thing, obviously, with us as dance artists, but it's very important for us as for the children too, to have them relax and to be in the moment. So making a small shape, and this time breathing in while you're expanding into some kind of curved shape, and then breathing out. Come back small again. Marvellous, thank you so much. I'm going to move on very quickly, and one of the really lovely things about bubbles is that they pop. And that's one of the very delightful things, and you can either watch them pop or you can make them pop. So our bubble shapes that we're making, we're now going to make them pop. So we'll make the shape first, so remember it could be small or large, and then when you're ready, you can just let them pop. I'm going to speak a little bit when you've got these shapes about the quality of them popping, because normally there's a sort of little moment of release. The popping is very sudden, isn't it? It's not heavy, but it's very sudden. So get that feeling of those bubbles popping and bursting and disappearing. You can incorporate big jumps here if you want to, or it could be really small. Great. Really nice. Instead of imagining now that your body is the bubble, imagine the bubbles are around you. And a bit like a child would very naturally, we're going to try and burst them. So you might want to poke them, or kick them, or squish them, or flick them, prod them, jab. So just in the space around you, use some of those very sharp actions to pop those bubbles, and try and think about different parts of your body that you can use to burst them. So it's quite dynamic. It doesn't have to be big, but think about actions that are really going to pop those bubbles. Nice. So I like the fact that there's families joining in there. That's lovely. Okay, so instead of the bubbles now being around us, imagine the bubbles now on your screen. So this little area here. So can you burst the bubbles by pointing towards the screen? So if you identify where your camera is, and have a little go at popping the bubbles. And if you are very careful, you might be able to use different parts of your body to do that. Great. And then imagine that the bubbles are just at the edges of your screen. So can you pop the bubbles now, but towards the other people that are near you? And again, think about different parts of your body that you can use to do that. Fabulous. So, all of these activities we've just done, open-ended, can you do this, can you do that? It's very much about your interpretation of the activities. We're going to tie it all together now. So we're going to put together all of those ideas and we're going to have a moment where we're interacting, because it's lovely to see everybody doing their own thing, but we are very much kind of in our own bubble, even though it's like a bubble shaped as a square. But let's make this a little bit more interactive now. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to decide, are you going to start as a bubble or are you going to start as a popper? Okay, so it doesn't matter which one, because as soon as you've done a little activity, you then get to swap over. So if you start off as a bubble, you need to wait until it looks like somebody, like Claire has there, has burst you. So then you burst. When you think someone has burst you, they might be near you, they might not be, but when you feel that, you're going to burst. And when you burst, you're then going to turn into a popper. So then you're going to point somewhere else and burst someone else's bubble. You will have a different gallery view to everybody else. So who you might be pointing at won't necessarily respond, because they might be somewhere else and they might not have seen it. But that's okay, and I like the randomness of that. But it's just sort of, we're going to let it develop organically, all right? So decide if you are a bubble first or a popper first. As soon as you've done that activity, you just then do the other job. Are you ready? We'll just have like a minute or two to have a go. Steady, go. I'm just going to have a little look now just to see what's going on. Love it. That's brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. It was great to see all the different interactions going on there, and the sort of serendipitous moments where bubbles popped when someone was pointing, and that was fabulous. We could go on, but we do need to move on to other parts of our webinar today, sadly. What we'll just do is a very quick sort of cool down and refocusing activity to finish off this part of the webinar. So just find yourself a comfortable space, so you can stay standing or you can come back down to sitting. Wherever is good for you. And I want you to go back to what we did at the start in our little warm-up, where you're choosing a part or a whole part of your body to make small. So make yourself small. And then make yourself big and wide, expansive. Have a nice breath in. And then breathing out. Release everything. Relax. And make yourself small again. And then imagine the bubbles are back next to you, and have a moment to just look around you. And very gently, you can either catch them or you can just let them land on a part of your body. Brilliant. So thank you so much for sharing that moment. Thank you for all getting so stuck into it. It's been fabulous to see everybody's responses. And, you know, I'm assuming that, you know, all of us are dancers, or we have an interest in dance and movement, and it's really lovely to have that moment, sort of interact together physically. So in a moment, I'm going to hand you over to Jo. I'm going to invite you to turn your cameras off again, but there will be more time to connect together very shortly. So if you put your cameras off, and I'm going to hand you over to Jo.
Hi guys, can you all see me okay? Can you all see me? Louise, can you see me? Hello. Okay, so I get a really easy job now, after all that physical activity, to talk to you about the importance of creativity. I'm going to reference a couple of things in what I'm talking about, and these will be on the Doodle Dance website, which we'll talk about later on. So I get the easy job because we are all creative. We've just seen that now. And over the last few months, a key word that has been spoken about is adaptability and creativity. Most businesses at the moment, including the arts, are having to adapt their work. So I wanted us to just think about this from a child's point of view, and how important it is now, more than ever, that we support children to have access to creativity. We can then build a strong campaign for dance, and by voicing that strong campaign, we can support ourselves to get back to work. So over the last few months, many of the children have had access to physical activity that, including dance, that has been really varied. There has been some amazing online creative practitioners out there, some of you of which are actually here today, who've been offering their services online, but a big majority of the access to physical activity has been of the copy me vein. And this is good for physical health and fitness, but creative dance can do so much more. Returning to school in September, the government's now talking about the catch-up curriculum, and this is really focusing on core subjects. However, we are in a privileged situation with dance. The government has released PE funding again, so this coming year the PE funding is available to schools. And I heard yesterday from a practitioner called Keris Kennelly, who I'm going to talk about later, that actually schools are being allowed to move the budget from last year, the underspend, into this current year. So there is actually going to be funding available to deliver PE. So that's really useful to us. And we are in a privileged situation because, unlike a lot of other PE activity, we don't have to use equipment, we can be socially distanced, and we don't have to have contact, and making and move the resource has obviously been designed around this. Now, the reason it is so important, and this is in my opinion, but this has come from recent research that I've been looking into the recovery curriculum, and also looking at trauma-based delivery, is to really understand the true impact of COVID-19. We must observe children in a variety of learning environments. Now, the amazing thing for us is that is what we give. We can give another learning environment. So a lot of work is obviously going to be in class or outside, and the kind of feeling at the moment is classes will be very much facing forwards at desks, socially distanced. And so that only presents one way to the teacher that children are learning. But we, with creative dance, we can give another learning environment. With teachers in the hall or outside, we can offer relief to the teachers. So the teachers have been under an enormous amount of pressure, but we can come in with creative dance and we can hold that space. We can hold that space so that teachers can observe their children in another learning environment. Creative dance will allow for self-expression, and it will allow for self-expression in all sorts of different ways and different abilities. And we know that small can be big. So we know that we can offer opportunity for children to work through a whole spectrum of movements that will allow for this self-expression and will allow all abilities to be recognised in that space. We also know the importance of building relationships. So many of the children have been without their peers. They've been, if they have been going to school as key worker children, they have been in mixed bubble year groups. They perhaps not been with the teacher they would normally know. And we can support building relationships and actually showing that we can, at a distance, positively interact with each other. And we can share ideas, and we can take turns, and we can work together at a distance. Now, the importance of this is that it builds a more compassionate and a more empathetic community. So all children would have had a very different experience of COVID-19, and obviously building a more compassionate community will be really supportive to that. Also, the importance, and what comes through in the book, is the importance of exploration and ownership. And the last few months have been incredibly adult constructed. The world has been very adult constructed for children. And we need this to happen so that guidance is followed by children, but there needs to be a balance. Children are more likely perhaps to conform to the guidance that is being set if they have a moment where they get to own their decision making. And I think that's what's really, really important. The lessons are very varied, and the energies in the book are very varied, so it brings a holistic and a kind of softness and a release of stress. And this, from an emotional well-being stance, just means that children are becoming more absorbent to more formal learning as well. So the other real important, before I finish, is to say that your creativity as well is really important. Claire has mentioned that, you know, you can adapt and change, and you've just seen now Louise take the bubble activity, which is obviously designed for being outside or in the school hall, but we've just adapted it to being online. So we are asking in that if you do go on and purchase Making a Move, we've got our hashtag Making a Move, that we are creative also, and that you can use this as a starting point, and you too can make your mark on this piece of work. So that's all I'm going to say on that, and I'm going to hand you back over to Claire, who's going to start to talk about some of the practicalities. Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Jo. I'm not going to go into any great depth on this, but I do think it's important we do reference it, certainly. So one of the problems that we all face is that the guidance and the regulations and the recommendations have kept changing. It's felt like we're on shifting sands. And more tricky than that, I think, is that each school is likely to interpret them differently according to their particular situation. So with this in mind, the one absolute critical bit of advice I would give anybody working in schools, if you're a freelance artist going and visiting schools, to deliver with them, you must ask to see their risk assessment, because whilst we have tried to be as stringent as we can in the ideas that we've done, inevitably whatever happens in the school has got to trump what we are suggesting. So you do need to see their PE risk assessment and work in line with that. You need to ask them about their cleaning processes and how that will definitely impact upon the schedule of work. You will need to get out of that hall really promptly if you're working there. How the school are arranging their bubbles, what is their guidance, what are their regulations on the physical distancing between you and the children, what space or what spaces will you be working in, how will you move from one room to another, how will the children, I know there's an awful lot to think about. Then will you be required to wear a mask, will you be required to wear gloves, and a big one I think is about footwear. Where do they stand on footwear, but also where do you stand on all those things? So you've got to marry your own considerations and your own thoughts and preferences with what the school is saying, and work out where you're happy, where you're not, and either have a conversation about it or consider whether you need to employ a different way of delivering other than face-to-face. So we truly hope that we've sparked some ideas and that you will be able now to maintain delivering interesting, creative and engaging lessons in the schools you work in. But equally, I'm sure that there are many questions that you've got that are still bubbling away, and I suspect many of them are around all these practicalities and the current guidelines. Now, it's quite possible that some of you earlier this week attended the really excellent, really informative webinar that One Dance UK delivered. If you missed it, I really recommend that you pop over to the One Dance UK website and look it up. I think Lindsay is going to put the link for it in the chat box. We're not going to go over all of that because they did it so very, very well. So now I'm going to invite you to switch your cameras back on again, if you want to, so we can just reconnect as a group. And now if you'd like to just take the next couple of minutes to mull over anything that we've done today, or any concerns that you've got. Are there any questions you want to ask? Are there any suggestions, ideas, concerns that you've still got? Please would you pop them in the chat box, and then what we're hoping to do for the last 10 minutes or so is to cover a few of those directly. If there are any particular themes that are coming up, anything we can respond to. And the plan is, if we don't manage to get around to all of them today, there will be a follow-up email and we'll try and cover more of them in that. But please just take a few minutes to mull it over for yourself and ask any questions. So I'm going to shut up now.
Just to add to that, while you're having a bit of reflection time, if you don't work in schools but you work in community settings, the same thing applies. So you really need to consider what the risk assessment is from the building, and how that works with you. So it really is about those connections with the people that you work with to ensure that everybody is happy and comfortable with what you plan to deliver.
So people are slowly just putting things into the chat, and in a little while I'm going to reflect back some of these. So somebody has just discussed about how we can get people physically into the space. One of the schools that I'm talking with currently are very much been looking at how I build a relationship without contact. So I'm actually sending a hello video to the school group. So I'm making one video that I can send out to the different groups that I'm working with, introducing myself and introducing why and what I'm going to be doing. So the children are going to be getting to meet me on their smart boards before I actually attend the schools. And then I am giving that responsibility to the teachers. So getting the children into the hall. So I won't actually be going into classrooms. It's really important that the space of delivery is where I'm going to meet them. So we've had it more that the children are going to be brought in by the teachers. And currently the schools that I'm working with, some are wanting me to be outside, and we're going to be working on the grass if the weather permits. And if it's indoors, we're going to be using PE dots, the flat round dots, and that they are going to be pre-spaced by the staff before or made accessible for myself to do it. I'm actually I'm kind of shielding somebody, so I'm making judgments that are, you know, I'm really being very serious with my risk assessment. Somebody has spoken about the kind of reassurance of if you're working in multi places. I think for me this comes back to a two-way communication, like what Claire was saying. It is really, really important that you as a practitioner safeguard yourself as well as the children and the staff. There is going to be an increased risk the more places you are in, potentially, if you are not following your own interpretation of the guidance and those different venues. So one of the things which I would advise, and it may be something that Louise, myself and Claire can do with the Doodle Dance funding, is a kind of you know, a checklist. I think it's really important as well that we don't forget about the normal safeguarding processes that we should be doing. Everything is talked about at the moment about COVID, and it's really important that you still know the things like the fire escapes and the child protection officer, and because I think there's been so much emphasis on coronavirus and that side of things that it may be that, you know, we could, and we've all been off for quite a long time as well. So I think the communication is really, really important on that. What are most people doing regarding the children dancing in barefoot or asking to buy jazz shoes? So I know Tori, at one dance, they've been talking about footwear. In schools, the clothing and the footwear should be in the PE risk assessment. So you will need to be asking the individual school what they want. However, as a practitioner, if you wish to wear bare feet, then you need, like hands, you need a foot cleaning process, you know, before and after. So it's putting that in your risk assessment and having a kind of kit for supporting good hygiene. So in the schools, they're talking about the catch it, bin it. You need to have that. You need to have your hand hygiene. But if you're going bare feet, you need to also have a process for that as well.
Can I just jump in on that as well, just some examples of what people are doing, because I know there's a local dance school to me, and they're having a special mat, and I imagine that we're going to see that quite a lot more in all sorts of different places like climbing centres and gyms. But there's mats where you can wipe your feet on, and it's like an antibacterial surface, so then you can continue wearing shoes, but there is a risk that shoes can carry the virus. So you would need to do something about your shoes, or if you are taking them off, then ideally, I believe a lot of places are then putting shoes in plastic bags where they're not going to touch any kind of surface while you're in that space.
Someone has brought up the fact about I have schools who booked us in September, other classes watching in the community. Would you recommend space them out? I can't say from a guidance point of view, but you do need to consider, you know, moving from one place to another, you need to be making sure fresh clothing and those types of things are being put on. So again, it's reducing the risk through the processes that you are putting in. Tori, there may be more kind of information on that side of things. I very much, and Claire and Louise will also agree to have a look back at the guidance and the One Dance UK information on that. Let's see. Does the One Dance link address differences between school content and school settings, such as church hall settings? I do know from very many of the different groups that I've been in that the interpretation of guidelines may be slightly different. If you're in school, it is very, very important that you are following their risk assessment. If you are in a school hall community setting, you should be able to legally access their risk assessment. And because actually, if you don't know what their risk assessment is, you can't write a comprehensive risk assessment of your own, because you could be obviously writing different things. On the government guidance and I'm sure that Tori would probably mention this in the One Dance thing, it is very much on square footage in regards to distancing. So we cannot advise that at this moment in time. The best place to go to is where your community setting sits. So if it's a community or a church, there is specific guidance for that. And I'm sure, Ellen, we can refer you to that. We're going to take all these notes. So if you have got any other thoughts, put them here, because what we're going to do is we're going to sort of print this off, arrange them and see where the gaps are, and then just kind of create a kind of you know, here's where you can find that, or this is what's being suggested to help. I'm going to hand you, Claire and Louise, is there anything else that you want to add into that, what we just said, before we hand back to Lindsay? And just,
do you just want
well,
to
the only thing is, sorry.
Do you want to just say about getting their resource, accessing it?
Yes, thank you. Gosh, well done. We've moved on to that bit, haven't we? I got so into the chat function bit, I forgot about the very important bit at the end. Okay, so thank you, Louise. So I'm going to let you know now how you can access Making a Move. As Louise said, I was in receipt of Arts Council funding, and because a lot of the work that I had planned to do, I couldn't. I really wanted to change my plans to create resources that were more supportive to artists. Our website launched just yesterday to get this all ready. So at the moment, presently, you could buy the resource. It's £20 for the 30 lessons and other information in there. However, we really wanted to support all you guys, just like we've been supported by People Dancing and One Dance UK and the Arts Council. So we have arranged with People Dancing and One Dance that if you are a member, you will be able to get it half price. You know, we know it's a real challenging time for all of us freelancers. So it was kind of like it was just really important for us to be able to do this. So you will be receiving, hopefully by the end of next week, we are all parents and we've got our kids at home with us at the moment, obviously, so bear with us. But by the end of next week, we will send out a follow-up email, Lindsay at People Dancing, that will be arranged. And there, if you are a member, there will be information. If you're a People Dancing member, there will be information on how you can access it half price. Also on the website, we are going to be adding some other resources as an artist series of support. And also in the follow-up email, we will put any reference to this chat. So we will look through the chat and we will try and link up where you can find further support. Like Claire said and Louise said, we are working with #MakingAMove, and we're inviting people that if they buy the resource and use it, that you share the developments that you make, you share your adjustments, and that as a whole community we really support each other. So as a community, Louise runs Primary Dance Network group on Facebook, so that's the Primary Dance Network, and Claire and I are going to be joining her to administrate that, hopefully. And we really suggest that you guys join that. We would really love that to be a place where we can dialogue. Louise, Claire and myself have been asked to be on the One Dance UK Primary Advisory Panel, and I'm feeling that's a really natural place. The Primary Dance Network is a really natural place where we can further conversations, and it means that we can then feed it back to One Dance, and we can feed it back to people dancing. So if you're not already in that Facebook group, Primary Dance Network, do join it. We will obviously send out information on that and all the other things as well. I'm also going to be sharing information on a lady called Keris Kennelly. She's been really useful to me over the last couple of years. She specifically supports children's activity and dance, but generally activity, getting work in UK primary nurseries and primary schools, and she does lots of these kind of challenges and such, and we're working together at the end of the week to try and have a look at how we can support more practitioners getting into schools. Her information will be also in the email, and because she actually has a approaching school workbook, so if you have not been in many schools and you're a bit anxious about approaching schools and you've got all this extra stuff to think about as well as trying to market yourself, she's got a really useful resource on her website, which I will put up in a minute in the chat function. So I think that's everything that we need to say, but we're going to hand you back to Lindsay. Thank you for that, Louise. That would have been dreadful if I told no one where you could get it from. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. Easy done as well. So just to kind of wrap up, I want to say, you know, on behalf of everyone here and the People Dancing team, just a massive thanks to you, Jo, to Louise and Claire, for today's session. I'm sure it's been, you know, really useful, really interesting, really inspiring, as we all kind of make this shift back to a very different kind of face-to-face work. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us as well. We will, as Jo said, be sending out some resources to you, so look out for that. But also you can watch back a recording of this webinar, hopefully within the next few working days, and we'll let you know when that's available too. We are planning some more webinars over the next month or two, so again, keep eyes peeled on social media, on the website and in your emails again. And we'd love to see you again. So thank you all so much for coming. It's been wonderful to connect and see you all, and we hope to see you again very, very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.